In this tutorial, we will learn about materials in Xenco Game Studio. Materials are the next step in the Xenco asset pipeline. Now that we've imported and created texture assets, we can start making materials. And materials, they use textures. And those materials, on their turn, they can be applied to models. They define the appearance of your 3D model's surface and how they react to light. Just like with the textures tutorial, you can start a new sample project and import the asset pack or the materials pack along with it to have a look at all the materials that are available. Here you will find materials such as wood, brick, concrete, marble, gold, and many other reflective materials that should give you a good idea on what kind of capabilities Xenco has. The amount of options for materials in Xenco Game Studio are tremendous, and it's pretty much impossible to cover all of these options in one single video. So for this tutorial, we will focus on creating two different kinds of materials and how to use some of its settings. I have created a little scene in advance for this tutorial. In the asset view, you can see that I have a plain procedural model, and then I have two different textures, a diffuse texture and a normal texture. Those are the two types of materials that we're going to make out of them. So let's start off by creating a new material by clicking on Add Asset, clicking on Material, and then finally we click on Diffuse Material. In this tutorial, we will not focus on PBR materials. So right now we have this material created, and as you can see, it looks kind of yellowish. Before we dig into all the properties of a material, let's first select this model in our scene and then drag in our material onto this material slot. As you can see, our model of a plane is now using this material that we've just created. Now let's have a look at that material up close. So to the top right in the property grid, we can see all of the material attributes. And those define the core characteristics of a material, such as its diffuse color, its shading model, and so on. And all of these attributes, they're organized into three categories: geometry, shading, and miscellaneous. Materials can affect both the geometry of a model, called vertex shading, and it can also affect its colors, which is called pixel shading. The geometry tab holds four different options: tessellation, displacement, surface, which is used for normal mapping, and then microsurface, which can be used for gloss effects. In the second category, we go to the shading tab. The material shading attributes define the color characteristics of the material and how it reacts to light. We have the diffuse option, which can be either a solid color or a texture. We then have options for the specular and specular model. If you want to create a Tron-like neon material, you will be using the emissive property. And if you want to create subsurface scattering, then this option is your way to go. In this tutorial, we will not focus on the miscellaneous tab, which contains options for occlusion mapping, PBR, and transparency. In a later tutorial, we will also focus on creating additional layers to create more complex materials. For now, let's just focus on the diffuse material that we have selected here. The diffuse is a basic color of a material. A pure diffuse material is completely non-reflective and it appears completely flat. So if we click on diffuse map here and expand the options beneath, we can see that we have a fallback value, which is kind of yellow. If we want to use a texture instead of a single color, we can either drag in a texture by holding down the left mouse button and dragging it into these slots, which appear light blue as soon as we've selected a texture. Or if no texture is selected, we can simply click on one of these hand icons, which pops up a select asset menu. Let's select the diffuse texture. Now that we've done so, we can immediately see the effect of this material taking place in our scene. The texture that we have in this example is quite low res. This is done for demonstration purpose. Now let's make a copy of this material that we have right here. Let's first rename it to something else. We can do this by either right mouse button clicking and then pressing rename, or we can use the shortcut key F2. Now I can copy it by holding down Ctrl C, Ctrl V. And let's rename this to diff plus normal. Because the second texture, we're going to add a normal map. First off, let's apply it already to this secondary plane that I've placed in my scene. Good. So now these two materials that we have, they are identical. But we want to set up a normal map for this. All we have to do is go to the surface property inside the geometry tab, click on the down arrow and click on normal map, which is the only option. And here we can drag in the normal map. As you can see, this looks kind of odd. It's a very dark texture. By default, it's a good idea to select the reconstruct Z option, because this will recalculate the Z index based on the X and Y values. As soon as we've done that, notice how the texture on our second plane changes appearance. The normal map that we've added creates the appearance of bumps and indents on the mesh. And it's actually based on the position of a light source that the shadows and the bumps change of this material. I'm just going to select this light that I have in my scene. I'm going to move it around. As you can see, the appearance of our texture now changes because of this normal map that we've applied. These are two of the basic materials that you will find inside your game project. In later tutorials, we'll have a look at other kind of materials, like for instance blended materials.